Ah, internet, you're a crazy place. Anybody who throws anything on the internet knows that, well, there's a lot of trolls, a lot of negative comments. Internet's kind of a terrible place. So, most of the time, you're not going to want to take anything too seriously. However, my Swiftech review, I've gotten a lot of criticism, and honestly, a lot of you guys have been right. I need to do that better, not only for you guys, but for Swiftech. So, here we go. Okay guys, we are going to revise our review of the Swiftech H320 X2 CPU cooler. So we're going to go ahead and cover this again, and this time I'm going to try to be a little more thorough with some details and try to make it a little shorter as well. So for starters, we have the unit installed right here. This is my Thermaltake Core V71 case, and here is my Swiftech H320 X2. Right off the bat, I want to say that this is a definite recommended product. Of course, I've always wanted to say that anyway, so that way I can give you the long and short before I go through the whole review in case you're just looking for a quick answer. But yes, if you are wanting to do liquid cooling, personally, no matter what size that you want to do, I would look at Swiftech's X2 series right now. That's the Drive X2 series. All of them, fantastic, fantastic products. They beat the pants off of closed loop coolers. So I want to get that out of the way. But first thing I want you to know is these are definitely really high quality units. We've got actual thick tubing like you would use in a custom liquid cooling loop. We have an actual CPU block versus what would normally be just like a cheap little copper plate with a pump running through it. This is a full-size reservoir right here, guys. A full size. This isn't like those little dinky reservoirs that try to attempt to get air bubbles. I mean, look at that. This pump. This is a great quality unit. The build quality is fantastic. I love it. I love what Swiftech's done with it. Great, great unit. So right off the bat, huge quality, good, just built well, really like it. I definitely recommend the X2 series. Let's go into some more details, and let's try to cover some of the things that I missed last time. All right, so the biggest complaint that I got in my comments, and honestly this was really legit, and sometimes, you know, people can be angry about it and whatnot. I actually got some really encouraging feedback. I replied to one guy where I basically said, hey, I'm sorry, and the dude was like, hey, I'm sorry, I was kind of being mean. It's all good, man. He was right. I did not go into the details of this installation well at all. So I'm going to talk about it here, and then I'm going to throw up shots from the camera to try to show you what's going on. But I'm going to try to really detail out what's going on with this installation. So first off, let's talk about the radiator. It's probably the first thing you're going to want to do is install the rad. Now, this is a 360 millimeter rad. What that basically means is that it is three 120 millimeter fans stretched out across, and that is exactly what it is. Okay, three 120 millimeter fans in a line going across. So if you're going to put this in a case, you need a case that can support a full 360 millimeter radiator. As you can see, this case easily does. Look at how much space I have. This is a full tower case. There are some mid-towers that will support it, but it'll usually be a little more cramped because the whole length of the radiator will almost cover the length of the case. So keep that in mind. If you do not have room, if it doesn't, basically if a case does not advertise it supports liquid cooling, I wouldn't try it. So full 360 millimeter radiator, you're just going to have the typical fan mounts. What happens is here's the radiator part. You can't see it from here in the video, but the fans are on the top. So really, all you're having to do is it's just like you're screwing three fans into the top of your case. Really simple. So it's not hard to install this thing on that level, as long as the case has room. One of the other things, though, is that when you've got this reservoir here, you can't do any kind of like push-pull configuration on your radiator because this reservoir is in the way. And that was something that bugged me about this at first. But there is something interesting. So there is some units that have the pump built in on the block, and that does save space. But for instance, EK has their Predator series that has a 360 millimeter unit, and they put the reservoir on the end. That does allow you to do a push-pull configuration, and that's nice. But it also makes your radiator that much longer. And there's some cases where that little bit of difference will be the fact that you can't fit the radiator in there. So it's really important that you check that out. One thing I will say, because of the length of these hoses, it's really easy to even put this in the front, in the top, turn it just about whatever way, because these hoses are nice and long. I've got them bent out and tucked in up in here, and they swivel very nicely. So as long as you've got room, you're probably going to be able to make this work. So installing the radiator, make sure you have plenty of room, make sure you have plenty of space. You can kind of see there's the top of my motherboard, but the radiator is also right up to the edge. Those are things to look for. I did install this into an NZXT Noctis case, and it did fit, and I was impressed. And a lot of that's because with the radiator, with the reservoir on the bottom of the radiator, that actually gives this thing a lot more room to fit versus other cases. So you have a good chance. Make sure you double check that. Now, installing the block is really simple on this thing. There's two little brackets that you have to connect for the AMD socket. There's two other ones. Otherwise, you would have an Intel socket that has different brackets. So you attach those brackets. They screw on the bottom. And then after that, you just screw right into the socket. Now, here's the thing. This uses AMD's included backplate for the motherboard. So that I do love it when coolers do that. But because it's using AMD's included mounting bracket, but it's using its own mounting on the actual block, you need to take off the plastic pieces that are for stock coolers, which means you got to find a way to hold that backplate in while you're starting your first couple of screws. That is a minor annoyance. And I really like units like Corsair and Cooler Master that have an installation procedure that holds the backplate in, then you just screw it in. We don't have that here, but because this is just a block and not a blocky pump block combo, it wasn't that hard. Recommendation, grab a little Scotch tape, tape the backplate onto the back of your motherboard so it won't fall out, then you can just screw it right in. You can hand start these first few bits of screws just to hold it in, then use a screwdriver to screw it the rest of the way in. So that is not very hard. The final step on the installation is there is a little fan controller hub that you have to plug everything in. It may look complicated, but it's pretty simple. Here's what you've got. You've got a power connector coming from the pump that is a SATA power connector. You got a power connector coming off of that hub that is a SATA power connector. So you're going to plug those two power connectors in, and that's all you're going to need. After that, everything else that needs to be plugged in plugs into that little hub that Swiftech includes with the unit. That thing has spots for all the fans. If I'm not mistaken, there's 4 spots to be able to plug in fans. They're 3-pin headers. And then the LED lights. So for instance, this pump block has 1 cable that comes off of it. That is just for the LED right there. There's 2 LED cables, one that comes off of the block, one that comes off of the pump reservoir area for this little lighting effect, and they plug into that little controller hub. That little controller hub has a little tiny switch, and if you click it, it changes the colors. So it doesn't give you a full RGB spectrum of options because you have to use the presets, but it still gives you just about every color you could imagine that you probably want with your build. I mean, you've got blue, you've got green, you got red, even some yellow. You can even do a rainbowish type color. So everything plugs into the hub plugs into a SATA connector, pump plugs into SATA connector, and then you are good to go. So hopefully that covers the installation a little bit better. Now let's go back into the performance. Okay guys, there was one thing that I forgot to mention on the install. There is one cord that comes off of that little hub that goes into your motherboard. Just a little 3-pin fan header, and that's just to help measure the speed coming off of your CPU temperature. So if you plug it into your CPU header on your motherboard, then that'll help control the speed. That's what actually controls the speed on your pump and on your fans. So don't forget that. One little tiny cord, snake it up, make it attached to your motherboard, one of the CPU sockets, or if you only have one, then the one. And that'll help control the speeds on your unit. there's one other thing that I want to mention too before we get into the testing phase. If you want to see the full details of my testing and the test system and all that, in an attempt to keep things short, go to pureoverclock.com. I will have a link in the description below. That is a 100% thing, right? Like the description's always below the video, right? Okay, well anyway, if you go to that link, there's a lot more details as far as, you know, my test system, my test methodology, and all that stuff. So that way you can check that out. But we're going to go through the results. I'm going to post lots of graphs on this video so you'll get to actually see numbers. So don't think that I'm going to just totally skimp on everything. But we'll just, like I said, there is more details there. Check out the site. Let's move on. All right, guys, let's talk about the testing results. Now, this is another spot that, in hindsight, looking at my previous review, I feel like I didn't make this very clear. So this time I'm going to keep it really simple. I'm going to drop graphs over this while I'm talking about it so you can see actual numbers. But overall, I'm going to sum this up very shortly to basically give you the general idea of, yes, this is the best performing all-in-one cooling system that you can get. So let's talk about these testing results. I used an overclocked 8350 and I did temperature testing. And the big unit that I was really competing against with this review was the Corsair H110i. Now, when I do my standard overclock test, I'm doing what I consider a very normal overclock. This is not pushing the boundaries by any stretch of the imagination. And when I was going up against the Corsair H110i, I found out that the Corsair unit did outperform this guy ever so slightly. And that's interesting because you'd think, well, with all this hardware and the copper/brass radiator and the pump and that should be impossible. What I found out was, though, even though Corsair may have edged it out, one of the areas, though, that Corsair doesn't even come close to is noise levels. When those fans on that GTX unit are going full speed, it sounds like a hurricane. Swiftech does not want to do that to you. They're not going to put fans in there that are going to get that loud. So they are going to put fans that are very normal. So that full speed, they are very tolerable. Not bad at all. Here's the thing, though. The reason why I say this is the best performing unit is then I decided, all right, let's go as high as we can go. So I pushed my overclock to as far as I could comfortably. I was able to hit 4.7 gigahertz. And after a stress test run, was running about 55.9 degrees Celsius. Now, I didn't really graph this out, but the reason why I didn't graph it out is the Corsair H110i, it was already running up in the 60s and falling behind at that point. When I really push the temperatures, that's when this guy pulls ahead, and those closed-loop coolers just can't keep up. The aluminum isn't transferring the heat as fast as like the copper and brass does. So ultimately, if you are really pushing the limits, this guy is going to push the limits better than any unit. Here's the thing. This is just a normal X2 unit. If you get the Prestige unit, aside from the fact that the Prestige has fittings, it also has fans that have slightly higher CFM than what the normal unit does. So even though the Prestige unit costs more, you should get even more cooling performance out of it. So guys, performance-wise, this thing is a king. It's not just a king on cooling. It's also a king on noise level, and it just works. This pump, I mean, I'm redoing this review, so I've had this unit in for months now, never making a noise, still just silent as can be. I love this unit. It's a great unit. Performance-wise, excellent. So there's just really no reason not to tell you that, yes, this is the unit to own. I would definitely consider a Drive X2 if I was going to do any kind of liquid cooling whatsoever. All right, guys, let's wrap this up again. So what we have here, we have a unit that is just built really, really well. We have excellent performance. We have something that is just different. Really, guys, this is a custom liquid cooling loop that is pre-assembled so that it's easy for you to install. That's what it is. And here's the deal. The prices on the Swiftech site are still really good. You're looking at about $165 for this unit. That is fantastic. That's more than a lot of your closed loop coolers, but not a lot more. And the quality and performance, I feel like, is really worth it. Now, I will say one thing. Having a 360 millimeter radiator is a little bit difficult. Size-wise, it takes up a lot of space. Something that you'll hear some cooling people talk about is something called resonance. When you have 3 fans running together at the same speeds, it creates a kind of a weird noise. It's a resonance. It's not loud, but sometimes it's noticeable and can be a little obnoxious. Here's the deal, guys. If you don't have a full 360 millimeter space for this guy, take a look at the other units. They've got 240 millimeter radiators, they've got 280 millimeter radiators, and they've even got like 140s and 120s. So take a look at what Swiftech has to offer. They got a huge range of things that you can do that would fit in your case and still give you excellent performance. If I was doing this personally and wasn't doing a review, I'd probably look at the Drive X2 280 millimeter one with 2 140 fans. Way less problems with the resonance, but still having a lot of cooling potential. 280 just seems like that sweet spot if you're just cooling the chip. However, you want to add a GPU block, having that full 360 millimeter is really going to come in handy. And that's the thing. You can easily add that. You've got the reservoir, you've got the radiator, you got the block. You put a block on your GPU and tie in with the hoses, bleed the air out, you've got liquid cooling that was much easier and much more affordable than what you can normally get with a custom loop. So because of everything, and especially time-wise, I mean, look at this, months, still running strong. There's no question. Swiftech, the Drive X2 320 millimeter liquid cooler easily gets a pure overclock Editor's Choice Award. So hopefully this will cover things a little better for you guys. I really want to try to cover the installation, but I still want to keep this kind of short. I wanted to throw more graphs on top. I'm hoping that with everything that I'm adding, that'll help give you a better idea of what's going on with this unit. Hopefully you like this review, a little better revised than the previous one. So let me know in the comments though. I do pay attention to those things, and if it's a constructive comment, I'm going to use it, and I'm going to try to change things. So if it's more comments about my virginity, I'm not going to listen to those. There's only so much I can do about that anyway. Anyway, I'll catch you next time.